Well, hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Feeling Smarter. As always, I'm joined by Tim Miller. G'day, Tim. How are you?
Aaron, going very well, thank you.
Well, we could have recorded this together this week, but we were kind of got caught up in what was a fairly hectic SMSF property masterclass. And today, we, as we reviewed a lot of the content that we had from that session and the questions that followed, I guess the area that piqued our interest the most was in respect to the activity around what activities individuals might be able to undertake in respect to their property. And most importantly, looking at the context of repairs and maintenance and improvements, but also thinking about this now in the context of the non-arm's length expenditure rule. So, Tim, I might get you to sort of just kick things off a little bit around the context of this today and some of the areas that were flagged and that we raised throughout the session as well.
Yeah, look, I guess the thing was, Aaron, that what we wanted to really sort of drill down into is that there's different elements of the legislation that we have to contemplate with regards to the work that is performed when a self-managed super fund owns property.
Yep.
And given that in some instances, some of that work is going to be repairs and maintenance, and obviously the nuances between repairs and maintenance is relatively small. Most things, from what we were talking about, were more akin to being repairs than maintenance as such. But everyone's circumstances are going to differ. Versus then, where do we go from improving an asset? From repairing an asset all the way through to improving asset, and what are the consequences of who undertakes that work? So, one, how is it funded? And then two, who is performing that work? And then what are the ramifications if A, that investment is held via a limited recourse borrowing arrangement? B, if the work is performed by a related party, should there be remuneration paid for it? And then if it is performed by a related party, do they satisfy the requirements, say from a 17B remuneration of trustee session scenario, or are they just performing for sort of, I guess, low skill um, tasks that ultimately can be performed by anybody? So we really kind of tried to cover a lot of areas and sort of identify the key issues versus those that was like, well, there's nothing to see here.
Yeah, and it's that intersection now where it's very common where someone goes, well, the tap's broken in the rental property and it's owned by the fund, and do you go in and fix the washer? I mean, we use some of the outdoor activities around the
Yep.
garden, fixing some of the sprinkler heads and those sorts of things. But part of our role as a professional is trying to help the trustee in these activities understand how far is too far.
Yep.
So, what things can you do that are insignificant, trifling, that don't really matter and aren't going to get you in trouble? Whereas there is a certain line, and there's no clearly defined line. It's basically the facts and circumstances of what transpires that then can get you into trouble. And as you've touched on, it's that intersection of well, are you repairing or maintaining an asset for the purposes of LRBAs? Are you doing an improvement? If you're doing the improvement, well, you have to use the fund's own resources to do that. But are you also using your skills? Have you gone down to Bunnings to buy some materials, which then overlap things like related party acquisitions? And then I guess the final aspect to that we touched on as well was the interaction now with the non-arm's length expenditure rules and understanding what hat you're wearing as well. So there are a range of factors that we need to work our way through. So to you, I guess, just some comments that maybe advisors need to be thinking through, especially with the communication with their clients around those particular issues.
Yeah, well, look, I guess the first comment I would start with is, firstly, if we're looking at a property that is under a limited recourse borrowing arrangement, then we clearly need to understand that we can't use, as you highlighted before, we can't use borrowed monies to make any improvements to it. And SMSF ruling 2012-1 was a great indicator for differentiating between repairs, maintenance, and improvements as such. And it goes to great lengths to say that there's nothing wrong with improving an asset that is subject to a limited recourse borrowing arrangement, so long as A, you don't change the nature of that investment. So, you can actually make improvements to a house, and we use the example of adding a swimming pool. That doesn't change the nature of the house, but then the fund must have adequate capital to pay for the installation of a swimming pool versus using borrowed monies. And similarly, with things like repairs and maintenance, you can use borrowed monies, but ultimately you need to have that factored into the original loan agreement that you've got, redraw facilities or drawdown facilities from that loan to be able to use for the repairs and maintenance. And so, to me, it suggests that it's a long path to go down to refinance just for repairs and maintenance purposes. So you're generally going to again be using the fund resources, but then the size of the transaction is often going to dictate whether or not you ultimately want to use the fund's resources, or whether you're just going to try and undertake that work yourself. And probably, if we go back in time, we used to have this concept about excess contributions, and they talked through this concept of the de minimis rule. Right? Well, what we've never really found out when it comes to, the size of a related party transaction is where's the line from a de minimis point of view? What can we do? Because the examples that the tax office give us is, well, you can replace a washer without a problem, but you can't install an air conditioner. And there's a big gap in between a set of washers and an air conditioner from a costing point of view, be it labor, be it materials, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, and I guess taking that a step further is when we do look at things that are more material in nature with that work that's being undertaken, we then also have to look at the interplay with the contribution rules as well. And we did touch on the fact that there would be circumstances where maybe someone who is suitably skilled to undertake that work, so maybe electrical work, maybe plumbing work, even the pool, when we spoke about that, it talked about that there's a level of certification that's required in respect to that work. So the fact that we have this undertaking of works that need to be done, subject to the service versus the materials that are done, we can end up in a situation as well whereby A plus B doesn't equal C, it actually equals D, E, or F, which then obviously interplay with, well, have those skills and services plus the fact that those materials have been done actually then translate into something that could get caught into the contribution rules as well.
Yeah, that's right. Which is why, and we're going back many years with regards to how we got to this point from an ATO position. But it's why it's pretty critical, I think, if you've got SMSF trustees that have the appropriate skill set. Again, let's use a swimming pool. If they do install swimming pools and they have a rate, and they have a labour cost, they obviously know the materials or whatever, that they are actually drawing up the appropriate invoice for the SMSF to be able to undertake that installation and pay for everything, so that you're not trying to determine what C, D, E, and F and that are. You actually just know what the cost base is up front. But then, of course, you do run into that issue of, okay, well, the materials required to install the pool, right? Is that being purchased by you as a builder first, and then by being on sold to the SMSF, in which case you've then got related party acquisition considerations. And so you might have to look at things such as agency agreements or whatever else it might be. And so it creates a whole world of issues to consider. It's not just a matter of, I've got the skills, I can do the work. It's a matter of, I've got the skills, have I got the process in place to be able to apply these skills for the SMSF to ensure that I don't fall foul of the limited recourse borrowing rules, the acquisition of asset from related party rules, the providing financial services, financial assistance to members' relatives, 17B, non-arm's length income. So there's so many factors that we have to take into consideration when we're talking about property transactions.
Yeah, and from that, I guess, just to wrap this up, that was one of the areas that we really did focus on at the beginning, is the thought bubble. So what are all the things that we need to be across? And there are so many aspects to that with SIS regulations, and you touched on a lot of those. Income tax considerations, and I think the gnarly one is, it's alive and well in the context of non-arm's length expenditure and stuff. But the rules are very clear now that if we taint that asset in any way, shape, or form, we actually permanently taint that asset, which can become hugely problematic. And then I guess the other aspects, in addition to that, we then have to factor in GST, we have to factor in stamp duties, other state-based taxes like land tax and the like, getting your documentation right. So there's no kind of magic pill that says, here we go, let's organise this property, let's run it, let's do what we want to do, and we'll end up with a fantastic result. And I guess that's what our property masterclass was all about, is to try and unpack these things strategically, because you can use debt, because you can acquire ordinarily, because people might want to develop property, because people may want to make improvements to that property. It can be commercial property, residential property. There are just so many layers to this topic that it provides a fantastic opportunity as a professional to really get your teeth stuck into it and provide some real value add to your SMSF clients.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you once again, Tim. That was a fantastic masterclass that we had this week. If you would like to find out more, we do run masterclasses 3 times a year in addition to our SMSF Day. You can purchase those individually, but we would encourage you to become a CPD member, where you get access to all of the masterclasses as part of your CPD subscription, not only to attend live, but also through our learning platform as well, which I know, Tim, you've been very busy putting together all the CPD assessments as well.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks once again, mate. We'll speak next week.
No worries. See you, Aaron.
Bye for now.
Bye.